Hey guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about Napoleon and how he came to power in France, the conditions that were there to allow that. We've already talked a little bit about those in class on Wednesday, um, but we want to be able to explain how he built his empire and what were the headwinds that he faced in keeping that empire going. I'm going to email you these notes. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over definitions here. The scorched earth policy, we talked a little bit about that, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Napoleon Bonaparte, we talked a little bit about the fact that he was a military leader. He rose very quickly through the ranks, and in 1799, he overthrew the Directory. We talked about the fact that the Directory period was one of the parts, the four parts of the French Revolution. He set up a three-man governing board, which was called the consulate. And interestingly enough, after he set up the consulate, he became the first consul. And somebody asked in class on Wednesday, why didn't they just call themselves what they wanted to be called? And Napoleon did. By 1802, he had declared himself consul for life. 2 years later, he decides consul for life is not enough of a term. He declares himself to be emperor. That is pretty much that's what he was shooting for. He wanted to be the leader. Napoleon consolidated his power, gathered his power, centralized his power by controlling prices on just about everything in the economy. But on top of that, he did encourage a lot of new industry. The things I've got listed here, they all sound really good, and standing alone that they are. But it was the other parts of Napoleon's rule that was his downfall, not necessarily this stuff here. He imposed a set of laws called the Napoleonic Code, which, here again, that taken by itself is pretty good, with the exception of the fact that women lost a lot of rights. The equality of all male citizens, religious toleration, the abolition of feudalism, where you had serfs who were tied to one particular piece of land. We've talked about that before. They weren't exactly slaves, but for all intents and purposes, they really were. They were slaves tied to a piece of land as opposed to slaves owned by an individual person. But getting rid of feudalism was a step forward. Between 1804 and 1812, Napoleon fought a series of battles, and he was incredibly successful during the first part of his reign over France. Napoleon, however, was unable to defeat the British. He actually attempted to attack the British, but the British Navy pretty much destroyed France's navy at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. He established a lot of blockades, which basically meant he would attempt to keep goods from going in and coming out of Britain. In other words, stopping imports and exports. He was successful at this to some extent, but Britain and their navy was able to keep enough trade going that it didn't bring Britain to its knees like he was hopeful that it would. In 1813, the Alliance defeated Napoleon in the Battle of the Nations. Now, this was a group of countries in Europe that had decided that Napoleon's expansion was not in their favor. I'm not going to get into who all was a part of this. This is what you need to know, is that he was defeated. And so this is what we were talking about in class on Wednesday as well. 1814, he abdicated, which is just an official term for he left and ran away. And Louis XVIII became king of France. A little while later, and I can't remember the length of time, but it was not long, Napoleon returned, because there were a lot of people in France who were afraid that because of Louis XVIII's policies, that a lot of the things that were going on before the revolution would begin to happen again. They were afraid of basically the three estates being set up again. That's a good way to look at it, is that the people of France, especially the people in the third estate, were concerned that that system would be brought back. So Napoleon's last defeat was by the British Army at the Battle of Waterloo. At this time, he was forced to leave, to step down. This took place about 100 days after he had come back into power. And this marks pretty much the end of the French Revolution. At the end of the Revolution, there was a group called the Quadruple Alliance. That was Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Britain. Yes, Chase, I said Prussia. And their goal here was to maintain a balance of power between the nations and to attempt to set up a governing system that would keep somebody like Napoleon from attempting to expand and take over Europe ever again. And thus ends the French Revolution.